Hello and welcome to another episode of Spart Talk. Today's a bit of a full house as we're joined by three members of the Just Break Already caucus in the DSA. That's the Democratic Socialists of America for those outside the Anglophone left. So welcome to Brianna, Edward, and Jack. Hi, comrades.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, how's it going?
Good. So the DSA just held their national convention in Chicago a few weeks ago. Well, 2-3 weeks ago. And the report is that the left came out as a majority. So we'll hear about this from Jack, who was a delegate at the convention. But just stepping back a little bit, as Mamdani-mania continues to unfold, and coupled with this high of the left winning in the DSA, I want to talk to our guests today about how to make sense of all of these things and actually if these are a step forward for socialists and the working class in the US. So that's kind of the theme that I want to try and explore today. Now, before we get to, the other thing I'll mention also is that Brianna, you also wrote a leaflet for this convention called How to Avoid Another Situationship. I like that title. And this was recently republished by Cosmonaut. That's congrats.
Yeah, how to avoid another AOC situationship. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, AOC situationship. Sorry, yeah. So we're going to talk about that as well and more. But if I can just start with a general question. Can one of you tell us a little bit about the JBA? What are you guys for? Why are you called the JBA? Just a bit of the picture.
Yeah, so Just Break Already caucus, why we're called Just Break Already. Well, I think for a very long time inside of DSA, there have been various people who have talked about, at some point we're going to have to break with the Democratic Party because, the DSA is part of the Democratic Party. And obviously, this creates a big contradiction if you consider yourself to be any kind of socialist, to be in an organization which is part of an imperialist party. And so, we took the name, everybody's talked about it forever. So we decided, okay, our name should be Just Break Already. Let's get it over with, right? Let's make the split with the Democratic Party. And let's further the process of actually having out like a political debate on what's necessary to actually build the kind of workers' party that everyone on the left, both inside and outside the DSA, says they're for. In terms of what we fight for and what we stand for in JBA, our platform is, we're for Palestinian liberation. We talk about fighting for Black liberation, call to open the police archives as well, and we call for an immediate break with the Democratic Party and the expulsion of all of the Democratic Party electeds. So the DSA members who are elected to office running as Democrats. So that would be like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, which is, less popular than calling for the expulsion of AOC, but is no less necessary because, both of these politicians and all the other little electeds around the country do their part in tying struggle, in tying the working class, and tying the left back to the party of Palestinian genocide and economic ruin.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess the other thing, and this is for myself also, if you could also just, one of you, give us a bit of a sense of what passes for left wing and right wing in the DSA. How do we kind of make sense of this landscape? If that makes sense.
I think that what populates a lot of the DSA left are people who would say that they're for building like a socialist party, a workers' party. To make a socialist revolution. People consider themselves like Leninists, Maoists, all kinds of things. But it's really the dirty break strategy is really the majority thing that we encounter in the DSA left. And so there we kind of have like a common goal in a certain way of like in the big picture wanting to make a socialist revolution, but the actual point of difference is the relationship to the Democratic Party, which is like the concrete thing, that defines attitude towards like a wing of the capitalist class. Then the right wing I would say are really defined by wanting to just openly be a part of the Democrats, and wanting to just like use the DSA to popularize the Democratic Party, or just very openly their perspective isn't really to accomplish any break. And so that's where you have just a lot of people who just want to openly remain not only with the Democrats, but you also have more like open Zionists, like the old Harringtonites. I believe that was the North Star caucus. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, I would say the attitude toward the Democrats does like change a little bit, whether you're on the left or the right. But the left wing are more so dirty breakers.
Yeah, I mean, this was actually one of my. Sorry, this was one of my questions preparing for this episode, which is, what is the dirty break? We hear about it all the time. And obviously, I think as Edward laid out, just break already is in opposition to the notion of dirty break. But if you can just lay out, like, what is a dirty break?
So essentially, it's the idea that you are going to use the Democratic Party to build up the forces of socialism, which, the idea is that you run candidates as Democrats, and then once you, it depends on who you ask, like what their metric is for when you can break with the Democratic Party. But it's, either once we get like 30% of the Democratic electeds, then we can break and form a workers' party, which is absurd and ridiculous. But
they actually have quotas, like
some people, some people are very detailed on it. Yeah, it depends on your level of intricacy, but like, and then there's the more sophisticated argument, which is like, well, they'll just throw us out at some point, which is like, okay, but like, what is that? Like, it's not like, like you're not actually like the whole point of it is like they think you can use the Democratic Party basically to incubate socialism, but the reality is like. You're not going to just get into a position where they're going to let you take over their party, for one thing, right? Like they kicked Joe Biden out when it was clear that he wasn't going to be a viable candidate. So like the idea that, it doesn't matter, you can just run as a Democrat forever, that's not going to happen, right? Like, but it really is, it's sort of like I would say it's the majority position in DSA for sure at this point.
Okay. Speaking of majority, so I guess let's get a bit of a taste for how this convention went down. So Jack, you were elected as a delegate to this convention, yeah?
Yes.
Why don't you take us through your experience? Give us the dirt.
Oh man, okay. So this was not only like the first national convention, it was also like one of my first experiences with like a lot of like DSAers at the same time. And so, I mean, it's just, the entire convention and a lot of people's politics are very tied down in like electoralism as the only means of doing politics, right? And kind of like any kind of suggestion that there is like room to work outside of that, is kind of considered sectarian, like the idea of not supporting Zohran itself or Rashida Tlaib, is considered a sectarian position to many. And so that really like kind of colored the conversations you had with people on the floor. I mean, I kind of got the idea that conversations with people very much revolved around like, could they get your vote for something, and less about like actually kind of having real discussion about like the meat of what is to be discussed at the convention, like the real political ideas that the organization should be grappling with. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of like an initial taste for how things went.
Actually, that raises a question which I should have asked first. What was the purpose of this convention? Why was it called? Like, was there a specific agenda, tasks?
Yeah, it's sorry, go ahead, Jack.
No. I mean, there were a number of motions put forward which the delegate body were going to vote on. And I mean, perhaps like the biggest loss of the convention, or like some of the most important ones, like censuring AOC and Edward, remind me. There was a couple others that didn't get gotten to.
Yeah, so it was censuring AOC and Nithya Rahman, who is a Zionist on the LA City Council and DSA member. Neither one of those were voted at the convention. That was pushed. That was referred to the incoming National Political Committee.
Mm-hmm. So two things that could have actually meant something.
Yeah.
They were kind of kicked down the road.
Okay.
So tell us about like the left came out as the winner. What does that mean? Are we talking that the DSA is now run by Maoists and Trotskyists and so on? Or what's the deal?
No.
Not in the slightest. I mean, it's, the left wing is kind of like, the left wing quote unquote victory just kind of refers to like a number of motions which like got passed in some capacity, some like amended, some not. But like really like there was no real like advancement toward like a left wing, moving away from like the Democrats. Like again, like the core issues at hand for the DSA, which is like distancing themselves from the Democrats, breaking from like making a real stance to break from Zionism more than just like a token amendment saying like DSA is not in favor of, it does not support Zionism or whatever. Any motion, movement towards like kicking people out of the party for being Zionists, just it fell flat. So I mean, in that sense, there was no real win for the left wing in any real capacity.
And Edward, you weren't a delegate, but you were also at this convention. Tell us about some of the discussions, experiences you had.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the discussions that I had, we did have a few more positive interactions with people, like toward the end, who were very taken in, I think, by what we were saying about, what's in our latest leaflet that Brianna wrote on avoiding the AOC situationship. Because I think that is like on some level, there's a big amount of excitement. Like at that convention, I would say about half the people there were wearing a Zohran shirt at any given time, right? Speeches from the floor, people were talking about how we need to have a Zohran campaign in every city, on every block. It was really, it was in the air, right? And so a lot of it, sorry, to get back to what I was saying, though, there is that little sort of lingering fear, I think, among a lot of people, like that, okay, in 2018, what AOC was saying is not, like, if you look back at it, it's not substantially different from what Zohran is saying today, So we'd have conversations with people, and yeah, every once in a while we'd talk to somebody who was like, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to get fooled again, basically. I mean, in so many words, but like, I would say the bulk. Yeah, I mean, I would say the bulk of people, however, that we talked to were very enthusiastic about the Zohran campaign and sort of about how things were going in DSA in general. Like, I spoke with a young guy from New York who was saying, "Oh, you guys already got your Zohran in Chicago." And we were like, yeah, and he sucks. Which was like it was a useful Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, who is he's not a DSAer, but the DSAers on the city council all support him, and he's a former teachers union organizer here.
So he's a progressive Democrat.
Right, exactly. And so, we talked to him like, well, since Johnson became mayor, the left is completely demobilized. Like, racial tensions are through the roof over how he responded to the migrant crisis and all this stuff. And people kind of like nod along and stuff. And we'd make the points about like, okay, but like Zohran's trajectory is not fundamentally different than AOC's, because his whole like political program is to work within and to try to resuscitate the Democratic Party. And naturally, that's going to mean he is going to capitulate on one question after the other if he wants to have any kind of future career. And sort of the response we got was, well, we hope we're going to prove you wrong. Which is not really much of a response. It's like, okay. So I don't know. We had a lot of conversations like that. But like Jack was saying earlier, we also got a lot of like, I would talk to people and they would just think you were like from Mars if you said we shouldn't support Democratic candidates. It was like that was seen as sectarian and ultra left. They call people ultras if you don't support the Democratic Party, or, which is interesting, but Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, that brings to mind a couple of things that I want to turn to now, which is Zohran, I guess. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room. So I guess maybe I'll turn to you, Brianna. Tell us about how to avoid another AOC situationship. And maybe just before you do that, well, I guess you're going to talk about what the AOC situationship was, right? A little bit itself, because some people might not have been political around that time. Because, I mean, just a little bit of where I'm coming from. There's a little bit of a similar dynamic happening here. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, the kind of like darlings of the left, announced several weeks ago that they're launching their own new venture called Your Party. They don't know the name yet. But, you know, what we've been witnessing in the left and generally kind of in the left liberal milieu is, again, this excitement, you know, about like, oh my God, like they're going to do it again. And you know, what you said, Edward, earlier about some people being like, oh, well, I don't want to be fooled again. There is definitely that because people are like, we don't want another Corbyn failure. But there is still this just like, just general excitement, like, oh my God, Corbyn, finally. But again, not really willing to learn from the lessons of the past toxic relationship. And I think, too, again, this huge sort of pressure about like we got to all stick together and like build the progressive forces because otherwise you guys are ultras and splitters and sectarians. So in a sense, we're grappling with similar political kind of questions. So that's where I'm coming from in this discussion, which I think is useful for some of our British audience as well. So Brianna, tell us, how do we avoid another AOC situationship?
Well, I guess I should give, some context of what exactly that looked like, because that's basically the experience that the DSA has already gone through and then is basically barreling into another one. And I think, we're basically trying to say, let's kind of draw some conclusions from that in order to not repeat it. So basically right now, AOC is she's pretty unpopular. I mean, she's unpopular, and then also she was pretty important for giving Zohran like a lot of cred because she endorsed him eventually, and people were really excited when she endorsed him. Even though she like recently supported, sending military aid to Israel and the Iron Dome and defended that even on Twitter. So some people were angry about that before, she was important for like stopping a national rail strike from happening. But way in the beginning of her career, kind of like Edward like spoke to briefly, she was the moment. It was kind of around the time of Bernie. When I was younger, she was like a celebrity, kind of how Zohran is now, she would play Among Us on Twitch and people would watch. And she was just, the Green New Deal. She was fighting the good fight. She unseated like this, old money incumbent. There was a whole controversy around her age because she was like a young person bringing fresh blood to the party, which is why people liked her. And so her trajectory is pretty disappointing for a lot of the DSA, and understandably too, because she went in there, she's like, abolish ICE, Medicare for all of that, and none of it's happened. She even went to the Met Gala and she was like, eat the rich, and look where we are now, So it's I think the thing to understand about her though is like why she ended up there. Because we're seeing like her political strategy is one that's shared both by the DSA more broadly and Zohran, obviously, who's going to be, in our view, like a take two of that. So like with Zohran, the similarity, I think, is just the perspective of, kind of like how we spoke about the dirty break left, using the Democratic Party as like this vehicle by which to bring socialism to the masses. And so what that does is really, keep all progressivism tied back to a party that actually represents the big landlords, the bankers, like all the people that are really responsible for the cost of living crisis in New York City and just throughout the country. But yeah, I kind of want to talk a little bit about also just the reasoning that people have both in the DSA and beyond, for why, Zohran is seen as like an important vessel to basically change the political waters, kind of move them to the left.
Right.
And really that's because it's seen as someone who's, first of all, in what is a mass party, right? Like, from our view, it's really important what class it's based on. But for a lot of the people that are supporting Zohran, it's about the fact that, this is the party where progressive voters go. And so it's seen as the only way that you could push American politics to the left or try to address the burning issues is in this party. And so it's kind of similar logic to, you need to get a seat at the table in order to like make change happen or pass policies or do anything real. And a lot of the sense in the left is, I think like Jack and Edward spoke to it too. It's considered ultra left or sectarian to not support a Democrat, especially a left Democrat. So trying to deal with this, our approach was one of really like, I would love to support a progressive candidacy for the New York City mayor, like the den of American finance capital. And that would be really great. And so what actually would constitute that is basically what we wanted to lay out and be specific about. Because for a lot of people, it's like, well, the Democratic Party, that's the starting point, that's the vehicle, and how else could you like make an impact?
So these are 3 points on the basis of which you would give support to Zohran?
Yeah.
So if he was to sort of adopt the 3 points that you're going to lay out, then he would become a supportable candidate, yeah?
Yeah, it would be support where we obviously have our political differences and things, but there's a certain line at which it's like, okay, this is someone who's passed certain criteria that they're going to make a real fight against the establishment. And that would constitute like, okay, this is actually would be an important thing to support. Yeah. So those 3 things we started off with, break with the Democrats, like we are, we're fighting for a clean break of the DSA. And so what that would mean is, the DSA should be independent, and anyone that the DSA runs should be independent of the Democrats. And Zohran, in his campaign now, if he made a break with the Democrats and, didn't caucus with them like Bernie Sanders does, that would be important. 2, we said to fight Zionism. So, on an anti-Zionist basis, really making clear, the fight for Palestinian liberation, unconditional. And then 3, to open the police archives. And that also basically constitutes making a stand against the police, and also like taking up the question of Black oppression, and, the police force that brutalized Black and brown people around the city, and taking that up. So those were broadly our 3 points. We can also talk about them in more depth as well. But the first one on the Democrats, it was just important, I think, to start off with the question of, well, the Democratic Party isn't a clean slate, kind of like how Edward spoke to. And like, feel free to jump in too. But it's something that is a party that's organized around, the interests of the oligarchy and the establishment. And how unpopular the establishment is, especially among DSAers, really speaks to the fact that, they're representing a class that is making all of this profit off of, the exploitation and the horrific conditions in the city. The thing is, though, this is a party that obviously represents, they represent the capitalists. And so going in there as a progressive, there's certain red lines that you cannot cross and remain a Democrat. Definitely when it comes to actually taking on the property of the banks, the big landlords in the city, that's a real red line. Fighting against Zionism, which is very bound up with the interests of especially Wall Street, which is in the city, that's another big red line. So things like that, you basically have to accept. You have to, the police, you need to be able to have a working partnership with the police if you're going to be a Democratic Party mayor of New York City. So these three things are just like some examples of how the very things that you need to take on to like improve the living conditions of working people are already, you can't touch them if you're going into this party because you need you need money, you need fundraising support, you need connections to be able to get things done. There's just so many ways that when you go into it, you're just so inextricably become part of the system and like limited by it because, the people who vote Democrat don't call the shots. It's the oligarchy, it's Wall Street who call the shots, especially in New York, especially. And so that's like, that was a pretty important part of what we spoke about in the leaflet.
Yeah. If I could just ask, like, I'm thinking of normal people, not leftists right now. I mean, in the US, two-party system. And so I can understand the pull of a progressive Democrat, especially to, Black and brown people, immigrants, etc. I can understand that. So I think what you're laying out obviously makes complete sense to, well, I wouldn't say complete sense to a leftist, but it makes sense to me. How do you kind of confront the real desperation or illusions that normal people, New Yorkers, who are going to vote for him, right? Like, how do you try and like make some of these cases? Because of course they're not, they know that the Democrats are no good, right? Like, as you said, like that they hate the establishment and so on. But then they see like a progressive guy come along and then they're kind of like almost sucked back into it to a certain extent. So how do you deal with that as socialists trying to like impact consciousness on the ground?
I mean, I would just say like very quickly, I think that there's definitely, I mean, depending on who you speak to, there's different attitudes about it. Some people are certainly more critical about the Democrats and what they've done. And then there's a lot of people who aren't, so it really does depend. But certainly when we talk about the more like the pro-Palestinian milieu of activists who, are really infuriated about the genocide and have been out in the streets or things like that, there's an interesting kind of problem that they're faced with, which is that he is still the most pro-Palestinian candidate that's out there. And so, but they also see that how he's been moving to the right, particularly over the question of Israel, especially because he's getting a lot of pressure, on the fact that you can't be going around saying that about a really essential American ally, which is in the middle of a genocide, And so, some groups like Within Our Lifetime, for instance, have been protesting him, and then they get like baited as CIA or FBI agents, which is really bad. But, then they also say, well, we're not saying don't vote for him, even though he's, he really isn't saying as much about the genocide now. And he's moved away, even from having previously kind of defended the slogan to globalize the Intifada. So
yeah, I just saw there was a headline from the New York Times a couple of days ago saying how Zohran Mamdani is distancing himself from the DSA agenda. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I mean, the headline kind of says what it is. And to bring it back to what you were talking about, you can't fight for the good things in an alliance with the party of the oligarchs, right? You're not going to be able to provide decent housing or whatever good things that Zohran is promising people if the party he's in is fundamentally tied to these bankers and landlords and so on. So I get that. I guess maybe Edward, if you can speak a little bit to, has there been a bit of a pushback on Zohran's distancing from the DSA? Are they already starting to feel some signs that maybe the other party's not so interested?
Well, not that I've seen in a broad-based way. I have seen, there's like gripes here and there. And then there's also a good portion of people who are like, he has to do this to get elected, like, so. And I think that's like, to speak to the previous question a little bit, it's sort of related, because the notion, and I think this is where there's a big gap between us and even the most left-wing elements, I think, on some level in the DSA, is that for them, like, the electoral road is the road to winning reforms. It is the road to socialism. It is the road to all the good things, the rainbows and puppies and all of that, right? It's like the idea is like, okay, maybe Zohran, there are people who will gripe about it, but like at the end of the day, a lot of people kind of line up because, like, okay, he has to say this to get elected, and the most important thing he can do is to get elected, because then we can get some reforms here or there, right? Which is sort of like, the reality is, like, if he gets in there, the pressure is going to be even higher than it is now, right? Like, the fact that he will be the mayor of the real capital of the United States and the world, honestly, like, will exert a tremendous amount of pressure. So even like those little reforms, like, good luck, because whatever he manages to get through is going to be token and not ultimately resolve any of the underlying issues, right? And I think that's sort of that's the problem with, like, looking at this through the lens of like, okay, maybe he has to say this stuff now, because if he doesn't, then he can't get elected, and then we can't get all the things we want and all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A few days ago, I was speaking with a comrade who told me about some of the sort of conversations he's having with his coworkers on this question, which is, well, look, I understand everything you're saying. I understand you can't fight the bankers in alliance with the oligarchy, but what you're proposing, that he just break with the Democrats, it's not realistic, because, come on, we have to be realistic, right? What else are we going to do? And again, I guess that just made me think of that in terms of the right-wing pressures, I guess, on so-called leftists, actual leftists in the DSA. I don't know if any of you guys wanted to touch on that, but I can understand to a certain extent that a worker might be like, well, he's at least trying to fight for us. And given that you don't have independent or working class alternatives, then let's go with the least bad choice. But
I mean, I think the question of experience is really useful. So we've actually gone through, there's AOC. Like you guys were talking about, there's the experience of Brandon Johnson. There's Nithya Rahman in LA. There's kind of countless experiences. I think the most powerful thing would be for people to actually take away some, like, lessons from that about what to do going forward, and to just be as concrete as possible, because we've seen it happen. So AOC is just useful because, she had a very similar kind of rise that Zohran did. And it was really, that approach. She shared that political approach, right? Obviously, you need to be elected to make change happen. You want to go in there and you want to unseat the Democrats that are part of the establishment, and then get a progressive Democrat in that's actually, like, connected to the working class community of New York. She's Puerto Rican, things like that. But ultimately, where did it go? That it was, that strategy of basically, okay, well, what do I need to do to keep my seat? Okay,
Right.
I need to get a certain amount of backers. I need to, accept that aspect of capitalism that will really be unchangeable if you're in the Democratic Party, right? Like, if you're talking about stuff like ICE, if you're talking about stuff like Medicare, which is very much connected to, like, the pharmaceutical companies and all kinds of, like, healthcare capitalists that really make a killing, things like very entrenched interests, at a certain point, it's like, well, you can't make a real fight. And well, they didn't also is the thing. Like we've seen AOC and Bernie Sanders, they went in there, they were popular because the conditions in healthcare, for example, are really horrible. And yet, they didn't actually make a fight because that logic is one by which you need to get allies in the party so you can get backing, so you can like pass measures in Congress, maybe, or things like that. And then when it comes to a question of like, making sure you get reelected and you have backing so you can get reelected and all of those things, then it comes to a question of, okay, well, you're making your political career within these confines, which are defined by like increasingly like giving in more and more to the establishment because, it's the oligarchy that tells you how it is. I think we're kind of seeing that with Zohran, and part of what we're saying is to kind of have people be aware and draw like the conclusions from what we're seeing too. For example, with how he's moved to the right over the police, he has actually disavowed the DSA's perspective to defund and dismantle the police. And because it is true, you're not going to become mayor of the Democratic Party on that on that program. On Zionism, he's openly he got flack because he said he believes Israel should exist as a state with equal rights. Even something as small and paltry as that, he did get a lot of blowback. So we're seeing in real time how his party and the backers of his party are telling him how it is if he's going to run on their ticket, use their money, run their city. And so I think it's really about trying to kind of draw the conclusion from what we're seeing and, pointing out the dynamic of what's really happening.
Well, and one additional thing I would just say about that is just sort of like what has been the consequence of these experiments in the past, right? Like we have the shift to the right, and there's a shift to the right in society overall, right? Like in general, like workers, may have been inspired by AOC or Bernie Sanders in 2018, but like, who did they vote for last year, right? Like Trump, like because the left supporting these, so-called progressive bourgeois politicians, like what it ends up doing is when they don't deliver, the win, like the people who ultimately benefit are like the most reactionary people you could imagine, right? Like, and that is who has the wind in their sails right now, and that is who is actually like on the rise here.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was just point one, break with the Democrats. Now, the other point you mentioned, Brianna, is to oppose Zionism. Now, I know that one of the things that came out of the DSA convention is something to do with a motion on anti-Zionism, right? I was wondering, Jack, if maybe you could walk us through, like, what was your experience motivating that Mamdani needs to oppose Zionism and the DSA needs to break with Zionism, all of that? How did it play out for you?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't even get to put it to the floor. But in my one-on-one conversations with people, I mean, it's just kind of, people will agree that he has problems, but like as we've discussed, like one struggles to think of something that like they wouldn't be able to excuse with this guy because like we've discussed, these are pretty important issues, and they don't really shake up at the end of the day people's like desire to continue supporting him, and that was kind of the vibe on the ground. Although, I don't know how much that is just like the DSA delegate body and how much that goes for everybody, but that really does kind of seem to be like what Edward pointed out. You can at a certain point you can point out the failures of the previous Zohrans, so to speak. You can point out Zohran's current failures, and like people still basically say like, well, hopefully you're wrong. But yeah.
Let me see. This question is something that you guys have been talking about for some time with Rashida Tlaib, right? Forget Zohran, she's a Palestinian woman herself who is an elected Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, she's called out the Democrats for everything under the sun, but she's still on the Democratic Party ticket. So I mean, I don't know. Can you explain, like, is she an anti-Zionist or is she not? Like, how does this work?
Well, one thing also, her political career has really kind of gone down too. Like, we've actually
Mhm.
seen because she in a way she was sticking her neck out, right, with that uncommitted campaign. The uncommitted campaign ended up being very committed to the Democrats at the end of the day, like, and Kamala Harris, who was like very openly pro-Israel, and
Right.
but her political career has also really taken a hit because I think it part of it is like it shows the dynamic where the pressure's really coming from the right. And then, like, what has the left done, or, the DSA in particular, has really just been, oh, well, we need electeds. We need these people who are going to, like, say the good things or, like, bring attention to the issues, maybe be able to pass a policy or two or something. But the right, who controls the party, right? Like, if we're talking about, like, the DSA, they really call all the shots. If you're talking about the Democratic Party, obviously the establishment is the main thing. Um, that they're the ones, who are getting the pressure, like, from the bourgeoisie directly, and they enforce that. And so people like Rashida Tlaib, they play a role that's ultimately, like, pretty useful in terms of keeping people around, and, for instance, not looking to a working class alternative in the last presidential election. But also, she doesn't have the same within her own party. She's been pretty isolated. She doesn't have the same like, power or, like, ability to kind of navigate the halls of power as she did before. And so ultimately, it's really helped keep the right alive, the establishment alive. Um, and it actually hasn't been able to accomplish anything really concrete in terms of stopping the genocide, or even like, taking all of that energy that was around the Palestinian movement and at least pulling it toward some kind of concrete, goal to help end the genocide, or at least organize against the, both of the capitalist parties that are responsible for it. So.
Yeah. I mean, on this show, I do try to orient as much as possible to actual working people and kind of either the struggles that they themselves probably feel in the job, leftward moving, socialist minded people. And, this is a question that's, I mean, I think any pro-Palestinian worker has probably confronted in one point or another, which is, why does the working class need to oppose Zionism, right? Why is that actually really key to the struggles of American workers today? I was wondering, for working class brothers and sisters who I know do listen time to time, if maybe one of you can lay that out. Like, why is that actually an important, like, really a fundamental thing for, like, workers to be won to?
Well, I mean, for one, sort of like the strategic interests of, like, the U.S. empire in the world are totally tied to the Zionist state, right? Like, these wars that the U.S. is supporting Israel carrying out across the Near East, ultimately, I mean, they're there to further, like, U.S. domination of that region, and through it the rest of the world, right? Um, like, supporting Israel is part of maintaining its sort of, or trying to keeping on top of the whole world situation, right? Which obviously is not good for the working class, because, well, it's not obvious to everybody because a lot of American workers think it's in their interest. But, the U.S. having this position in the world allows it to do things like ship jobs to other places, right? Like, I'm just speaking from a sort of a U.S. perspective here for American workers, but, like, also it's just like these wars all over the world. They mean this rearmament and everything that's going on. It means, like, okay, they're not going, like, whatever money they had for, like, whatever social programs existed, that's all going away, right? Like, to give you an example, in Chicago, the schools don't have any supplies this year. Like, there's nothing.
Really?
Yes, it's like there's no paper towels and stuff like that. It's like everything is being cut to the bone because the U.S. world, the world order that the U.S. maintains to benefit itself is going downhill, and they want to stay on top. So like supporting Israel is part of that, right? Like every weapon that is made and sent to Israel is like, more resources being drained out of the workers here and around the world to basically keep these parasites who run who run everything on top. And so like I don't know if I answered your question there. I was trying, but I think like there's like a natural interest, there's the common enemy, right, between the working classes in the global South and the West, the oppressed peoples of the global South in U.S. imperialism. Like everything it does is like directly opposed to their interests, because like, you're fighting Zionism, you could improve your own situation for one thing, right? Like, anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, I think that's really it, because I actually missed out an important thing that you said, which is, there is a significant, well, I don't know how significant, but there is a layer in the American working class that thinks, well, the stronger the U.S. is, the better off we are. They see that their fortunes are tied to basically Wall Street and the capitalists. And that is a really deadly, illusion. And I think you hit on the key thing, which is just really they share a common enemy, right? Like to try and improve the conditions of workers in the US, they need to struggle against their government, and that government is on the other side of the world wreaking havoc and aiding the Zionist state against Palestinians. So I think that's kind of it. But I do know that this is something that a lot of pro-Palestinian workers have confronted, and it's not so easy to win co-workers over to that. And there's all kinds of reasons to that, but I just wanted to actually just lay that out, and why actually it's really key for the whole Mamdani campaign, because here's a guy who'll play lip service, and not just lip service. I mean, he's said things and he's gotten blowback, so people are like, oh yeah, okay, good. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show that if you're not gonna oppose Zionism, you're not really gonna be a credible force to struggle against the establishment. I think that's the bottom line.
Right.
Yeah. And where he's getting pressure from is also the right, too.
Yeah.
Not the activists as much.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this third point, which is open the police archives. We've not talked about this on the show before. So I was wondering if you could actually lay out, like, what is this? Because I also know that you guys have gotten some blowback for this as well. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you calling on liberal bourgeois, whoever politicians to do nice things? So what is Open the Police Archives? How does it link to winning over Black and brown people? And why is that important for Mamdani? I know you already touched on this a little bit, Brianna, with defunding the police, but can you just explain, like, what's this campaign to Open the Police Archives?
Well, Open the Police Archives is basically about the fact that there's all of this brutality that's being committed against Black and brown people all the time. We know about it. And there's body cam footage. There's just all kinds of documentation. And basically, all of this information is in the police archives, and it's a physical thing, and people have the keys to it. But as soon as you become like a DA or a mayor or any kind of, politician, it's made very abundantly clear to you it's in your best interest to, of course, keep all of that secret, because that's how it works. And so we're basically saying, like, just let all of that, like, the public should be able to see all of that information. And honestly, I found it to be very popular. Maybe with the left, there's a little bit more of a, you're making demands on the state and that's not good. But for most of the people who I've spoken with, it's super popular because it's very kind of just like obvious to people. Yeah, we should see all this information. It should be available to us, and anybody who's hiding it, like, they should get the hell out of our way. So when we were bringing that here to the question of Zohran, it was also, I think, important in terms of really motivating, okay, we also do need to deal with the racial divisions and like state violence against Black and brown people that are part of enforcing segregation, which keeps like most American cities unlivable, and just it keeps people just like scared too. And it inhibits struggle, all kinds of things. It goes to the question of you as an elected official, what will your attitude toward the police be? Because that's a pretty important part, especially if running a big city like New York, which is similar to Chicago in that also every once in a while, public safety becomes a big thing. And it, a lot of it, is used to, prop up, law and order politicians that are basically for more repression and violence. So for Open the Archives, we basically put forward the demand to just, okay, you're talking about a campaign for working people, and working people are the ones that are brutalized by the police. And this is actually something that if you're going to wage a fight against the establishment and against the police and against, the right of the state to keep all of that information secret, then you would be for this very simple demand. Like, let's see what's in there. Yeah, it's the other thing though that's also important, and like, we want to put forward this demand and like, yeah, let's fight for it, but also to be kind of clear-eyed, that's not what Zohran is calling for or doing. And in fact, it really, he's really moving in the opposite direction, in terms of, he is very aware of the fact that he needs a working partnership with the NYPD if he's going to run the city. He said very clearly, like, he wants them to do their jobs. He thinks they have a very crucial role to play in public safety, and which are really, they're all true things if you're going into it as like, you need to run the city, in what is very like a, pro-capitalist framework. And that's also very crucial if you want to be able to work with like the billionaires or any of the other, vested interests in the city. You need to have that. You need to show them that you will keep things under control for them because you have that collaboration with the police,
Yeah. I mean, ever since the heyday of BLM, there's been a trend about, police training, making the police better, nicer, etc. So I was wondering, like, it's a pretty bad move, especially in a city like New York, to move to the right on the question of the police. But I was wondering, like, Zohran, dressing it up with all kinds of nice things he's going to do with the NYPD to protect people.
Honestly, it's a little... When it comes to the question of Zohran and the police, there's a bit of a doublespeak when it comes to the left and their take on it. So it's a little weird, but like, bear with me, because he's pretty clear. If you watch the mayoral debates or him taking pictures with that police officers, especially like South Asian police officers, he's clear about where he stands. But the left has a different take on it. Because at the same time, as he's very clear, I'm not for defund the police, I'm not for dismantle, I'm not, for any of that. He also is saying, okay, well, what about this Department of Community Safety, which is basically like the police won't do the social work aspect. So part of it is still like on a continuum with a lot of that, the BLM era police reform, because he's basically trying to like take the mental health stuff out of their duties.
All right.
So the left do see it as a step towards dismantling the police, even though he's openly disavowed that. So it's a bit weird, but ultimately I think it shows kind of what the problem is, I think, because okay, you're going to like take away some of their social work duties, and then they're going to continue to be like brutalizing Black and brown people, and that is what their job is. If there was a strike, for instance, of workers who were fighting for affordability, for higher wages, for a cost of living adjustment, anything like that, the police are the ones that would be sent to smash their picket line. It would be quite concrete.
But maybe the Black and brown cops are nicer about it.
Yeah, that's part of the thing. I mean, I think also what our approach is, when we're talking about Black and brown people, I mean, there's a lot. And also a lot of Black and brown people are dependent on the police for like jobs and stuff like that, and that can inform their consciousness too. And so it's like, okay, but there is a difference between the Black and brown people that are part of the police and those that get brutalized by them. And it would really be so much stronger to build a movement to fight the establishment and the police that enforce, the establishment and, everything, all their property and things like that. If we built a movement based on the victims of the police violence, if we actually, for instance, the case of Win Rosario, a Bangladeshi teen who was gunned down in his apartment in Queens, and it's been like a year, and his family just doesn't have they don't even have any information about what's going on. Maybe there's an investigation, whatever. They don't know anything, and so there's really a thing of, someone who is in like a, South Asian community, very isolated too. Like they kind of have their community, but how New York is, it has these pockets and they're very segregated and separated from each other. And it would just be so much more powerful to link up that case with the cases of other working people, Black and brown people. Sanaya Cheatham was a murder of this Black woman who is, it was covered up as a suicide that happened in the Bronx. Eric Dupre, a Puerto Rican man who was killed by the narcotics division also in the Bronx. To link these up, it would be so much more powerful and a powerful blow to the machine, like the Democratic Party machine that runs the city, to fight to open the archives and expose the crimes of the police, as opposed to trying to kind of do the reform thing in a way that doesn't inhibit a partnership with the police,
Yeah. Okay. Well, so those are the three sort of planks on which members of the JBA would give conditional support to Mamdani. I mean, based on everything you guys have said, that's not going to happen.
Unfortunately.
And I mean, on every single question, it just the left is so annoying. Like just the biggest apologists for these things. I don't know. I tend to get ranty sometimes, but I guess, I don't know, to put it squarely, it seems like we're heading towards another toxic relationship. Do you think? Do you think
Yes, without a doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it likely that he's going to win the election?
Seems like it from here, but I'm not in New York, so
Trump did say he would intervene if he won.
Oh, really?
So we might have an LA on our hands.
Wow.
Right. Okay. I mean, well, toxic relationship. Some people never learn. Hey. I guess to bring it back to the convention, maybe, Jack. So we touched on sort of the key questions that leftists and the DSA should be fighting for, but are obviously not, as well as how some of the more important motions, if they would have at least been put to a vote, that would have at least moved some stuff forward, but that's obviously been kicked down the road. Is there anything else of note from the convention that you wanted to relay to our listeners? Anything?
I mean, I think that's really it. I mean, I've gone over a lot of the bigger takeaways. I mean, not really to I don't think there's really need to go into anything in more detail. I mean, yeah. I think the general vibe being very parliamentary, that's already been kind of, I think, discussed. That was the most grating part of the convention, but otherwise, no. Edward, do you have anything to add?
The only other thing I would say, I guess, is, despite sort of a lot of, okay, so there was a lot, the left wing won the majority of the leadership. The right wing pretty much lost on most of the resolutions that they tried to put forward. But what I thought was notable, besides R22, which was for a fighting anti-Zionist DSA, which is the one everyone's talking about, was there were a number of smaller resolutions that were voted on DSA's labor strategy, right? Orienting toward like being within the labor movement, fighting for leadership against the trade union bureaucrats. These were put forward by the Marxist Unity Group, which we voted in favor of critically, because, they were like, go into the unions, fight against the union bureaucracy. And, the other one was like orient toward labor to stop arms shipments to Israel. And both of these went down overwhelmingly.
You mean they were defeated?
Yes, both were defeated overwhelmingly.
Oh, God.
And I think, again, that's just sort of an indication on like sort of the general outlook. Actually, maybe the labor strike one, it was a little less overwhelmingly than the arms and, fight for workers to stop arms shipments one. But like either way, it's just sort of like, again, it's sort of another thing I thought that was indicative of sort of like where the actual political, like where the actual politics of DSA are right now, right? Like the left won their majority, but like at the end of the day, like how they're orienting toward the working class in the real world is like sort of as advisors to the trade union bureaucracy, or people who go in and don't talk about like fighting the trade union bureaucracy at all, or if they do, it's for like small little changes or union democracy or whatever. So I thought that was kind of indicative. And then I think, like even on the fighting anti-Zionist thing, it's like as soon as the convention was over, now there is language that establishes like the ability to expel Zionists, right, from DSA.
Okay.
But as soon as it was over, everyone got on Twitter and said, we're not going to expel anybody. We don't do purges in DSA. It's like people are like, we're if we expelled everyone who was a Zionist, we'd lose the leadership of our branch, which says a lot. But like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Self-aware, yeah, but really bad politically. I think it's just sort of like, because there's this sort of like, it's very much the party of the whole class sort of thing going on for within DSA. But those were my only other real major takeaways, I thought.
You forgot to mention that they voted a resolution against AI.
Oh, yeah. There was the other one that was really funny besides the no AI one was the deprioritize the use of Twitter, which actually made the rounds this week because the DSA labor branch said they're leaving Twitter to go to Blue Sky, which no one's ever heard of, and Instagram.
That was such a fail.
Yeah. So I think everyone got a little bit of a kick out of that one this week. A lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, I forgot we voted this one."
Yeah,
and that's because Musk owns Twitter.
Yeah, right. Because I guess it's better to go to the one that Zuckerberg owns.
They're a bit late to this party.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to start wrapping up, but I want to step outside of the DSA bubble and look at it from the point of view of some of the haters. You guys also have gotten a lot of hate
the older
for being in the pro-imperialist, like working in the pro-imperialist party. I wonder if one of you could explain like why actually this is important work to do and why you're not just terrible people.
Jack, you want to give it a go?
I can try. I think, it's kind of like the primary task and everywhere, but in America is like the struggle for like a workers' party. And, DSA, for all of the problems we laid out, it is kind of like the most like it is like the most significant like left-wing party, nominally socialist party that's out there right now. It has a lot of eyes on it. And so I think it's really important to try to work within the party to try to turn it into an actual working class party. And I would say that that's kind of like the goal of the JBA caucus is like, to get DSA oriented on a path towards being a real workers' party, which necessitates breaking from the Democrats and a lot of the other things we've discussed. Honestly, aside from that primary goal, though, I mean, it's especially now that the ban on democratic centralist organizations participating in DSA has been lifted. It's a really good opportunity, honestly, elements of the left to have discussion. And I hope that that's kind of like the direction things go in the future. I don't know how likely it is, but it would be nice to see a future where like you get a lot of different people, delegates, representing these different organizations at something like a national convention where you could actually talk out and further iron out the various political differences and kind of reduce the sectarianism that's like rampant in the American left. But we'll see how that goes.
Cool. Anybody else?
I'll just say one other thing, because we obviously this is also like a useful debate to have, more broadly with the left, that some of the precedents in the Trotskyist Marxist movement have been used against us, and that the question, it wasn't really a question of should you go in. So sometimes like people will bring up the Chinese Revolution, 1925, 27, that era. The problem was that the communists went into the nationalist Kuomintang. And, the problem wasn't that they entered. The problem is, why are you going in there and what are you trying to do? And, so if people are like, you're going into, a capitalist party, or like the DSA, which is in a capitalist party, that's not really the problem. If you're going in there and you're like, we shouldn't be part of a capitalist party, we should really try to break that link. And, you understand that's a key question to fight in the interests of the masses on anything.
Mm-hmm.
I can just see the hate coming, but thanks for laying that out. That's an important point. Okay. I mean, I think that kind of sums it up on my part. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to bring into the discussion on the whole Mamdani DSA situation?
Join with us in conditional support.
Yeah, absolutely. I will link the leaflet in the show notes. Oh, actually, I did want to raise something. So I mentioned at the start of the episode. So Brianna, congrats, you were republished in Cosmonaut. Except nobody knows that Brianna's in JBA. So this is my shtick with Cosmonaut. Hello, not cool. But that's cool. I remember way back when I was a baby Marxist, I used to read Cosmonaut, so I know it gets around. So
cool.
I hope people do read it and somehow find a way to contact you, because I'm not sure if there's a way to contact you from there. I don't know, but yeah, absolutely fight for the JBA program on Mamdani. Absolutely. Okay, well, on that note, I think that's it for us today. Yeah.
One last thing real quick is our social media, because we do have it for JBA if you're in, because DSA Life is very much...
Are you on Blue Sky?
No, JBA is not on Blue Sky. We have Twitter.
We're gotta go there if you want to keep fighting.
We're holding out. So on Twitter, we're at Clean Break Now. And on Instagram, we are at DSA Just Break Already. And I believe there's an underscore in there somewhere. But if you search
I'll find those accounts.
Underscore after DSA, but you should be able to find them. Yeah,
absolutely. Do get in touch. And yeah, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming to the show, sharing your experiences, your insights. Really appreciate it. And we'll hear from you soon again, I hope, maybe around the time of the elections or something. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Say
bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right.